There is something sitting open on your screen right now. It is running in the background while you work, while you scroll, while you search for things you would never say out loud to another person. You probably have not thought about it in years. It just lives there, doing its job quietly, invisibly, and you trust it the way you trust your electricity or your running water. You assume it is neutral. You assume it is just a window between you and the internet. About a year ago, I did something that permanently changed how I see this software. I started actually looking at what it was doing, not reading blog posts about it, not skimming headlines. I pulled back the curtain and looked at the full architecture of what this program is, who built it, why they built it the way they did, and what it does with every single thing you give it. And I want to walk you through exactly what I found, because once you see it clearly, the word browser will never feel like an innocent description again. The software I am talking about is Google Chrome. And by the time we are done, you are going to understand why deleting it is one of the most meaningful things you can do for your digital life right now. Not because I want you to be paranoid, not because I am selling you something, but because the gap between what this program actually is and what most people believe it to be is one of the largest I have ever encountered in technology, and you deserve to know. Let us start with the scale, because the scale is what makes this matter so much. As of early 2026, Google Chrome accounts for approximately 65% of the global browser market. On mobile devices specifically, that number climbs even higher, with Chrome's mobile share sitting at nearly 71%. And when you look at total active users, you are talking about more than 3.5 billion people globally who use Chrome as their primary browser. 3.5 billion. That is not a user base. That is a civilization. There is not a single country on Earth with that population. There is not a single piece of consumer software in all of human history that has touched that many lives simultaneously at that level of intimacy. Because a browser does not just sit on your computer. A browser sits between you and everything. Every search you perform, every article you read, every bank statement you pull up, every symptom you look up at 2 in the morning because you are too embarrassed to ask another person, every flight you search for a trip you never ended, up booking, every forum thread you read about something deeply personal, all of it goes through Chrome first. And here's the question I kept coming back to when I really internalized that number. What does the company that built this browser actually do for a living? Because that question is the most important one. Not what does Chrome do? What does Google do? And the answer is advertising. Specifically, targeted advertising. In the first quarter of 2025 alone, Alphabet, Google's parent company, reported consolidated revenue of $90 billion, up roughly 12% year over year. Full-year forecasts for Google's advertising revenue in 2025 were projected at around $296 billion. The overwhelming majority of that money comes from one thing: showing the right ad to the right person at the right moment. And the engine that makes that possible is behavioral data. Knowing who you are, what you want, what you fear, what you are about to buy, what you searched for. 3 days ago, what keeps you up at night? The more of that data Google has, the more precisely it can target ads, and the more it can charge advertisers for that precision. This is not a side effect of Google's business. It is the entire architecture of it. Now here's the thing that took me a while to fully absorb. Chrome is not a product Google sells. Chrome is a data collection system that Google gives away for free, because the moment you install Chrome and start browsing, you begin generating the raw material that powers the most profitable advertising machine in human history. If you are signed into a Google account in Chrome, which the browser actively encourages you to do from the very first launch screen, then every page you visit is logged, time-stamped, and synced to Google's servers. Every search you perform is stored. Every link you click is recorded. Google frames this as a convenience feature. Your history follows you across devices. But the other side of that convenience is that Google holds a detailed, time-stamped, identity-linked archive of your entire internet life. And I want to go further than the obvious, because the signed-in tracking is almost the polite part of this story. Here is what really unsettled me when I dug deeper. Even if you are not signed into a Google account, even if you have never signed into Chrome in your life, even if you genuinely believe you are browsing privately, Google still has eyes on you. Through products like Google Analytics, Google Tag Manager, Google Ads, and DoubleClick, Google has embedded tracking infrastructure across an estimated 85% of the top websites in the world. That means on roughly 8.5 out of every 10 websites you visit, Google has code running on that page, code that can observe your behavior and report it back to Google's servers. The website is not Google. You never went to google.com, but Google is in the room. It has been in the room every time. Think about what that means across a typical browsing session. You open a news article. Google Analytics is tracking which stories you read and how long you stay on each one. You visit a health information page. Google Tag Manager is observing what medical topics you are researching. You check a travel site. Google's ad infrastructure is noting your destination preferences and your price sensitivity based on how you filter results. None of this required you to visit Google. It happened because the tracking infrastructure is woven across the web like an invisible nervous system, and Chrome is the body through which most of the world moves through it. This is what researchers call the surveillance advertising ecosystem, and Google is its dominant operator. The data collected across this network is aggregated, analyzed, and used to build behavioral profiles on billions of individuals. Profiles that include inferred characteristics like political leanings, health conditions, financial, stress levels, relationship status, and psychological vulnerability. These are not wild accusations. They are the documented findings of academic researchers, regulatory agencies, and the evidence that has surfaced through years of antitrust litigation. Which brings me to the legal dimension of this story. Because right now, in 2025 and into 2026, Google Chrome sits at the center of one of the most consequential antitrust battles in the history of technology. In August 2024, a federal judge ruled that Google had violated the Sherman Antitrust Act and illegally maintained a monopoly in search and search advertising. That ruling found specifically that Google used its control over distribution channels, including Chrome, to suppress competition and lock in its dominance. The Department of Justice's proposed remedies, filed in late 2024, were aggressive. They included forcing Google to divest Chrome entirely. The argument being that Chrome, in Google's hands, constitutes an instrument of illegal monopolization too dangerous to leave intact. The judge ultimately rejected the Chrome divestiture in his September 2025 ruling, describing it as incredibly messy and highly risky, but the DOJ did not accept that outcome. By its February 2026 deadline, the DOJ filed across appeal seeking stronger remedies, including the forced divestiture of Chrome or Android that the district court had rejected. The appeals court is expected to hear arguments in late 2026 or early 2027. Let that land for a moment. The United States Department of Justice is actively pursuing, through the federal appeals process, the forced sale of Google Chrome, not because a few privacy researchers are uncomfortable with it, but because the government's antitrust division concluded, after years of investigation and hundreds of thousands of internal documents produced during discovery, that Chrome's role in Google's data collection and advertising monopoly is so central that it cannot be disentangled from the illegal conduct. And while that legal battle plays out over the coming years, Chrome continues to run on 3.5 billion devices, collecting behavioral data at a scale that has no precedent in human history. Now I need to talk about something Chrome did in April 2025 that went almost completely unnoticed outside of the privacy research community, something I think is the clearest possible signal about what Google's actual priorities are when it comes to your privacy. For years, Google had been promising to phase out third-party cookies from Chrome. Third-party cookies are the primary technical mechanism that allows advertisers to track you from website to website, building a profile of your behavior across the entire internet over time. Firefox blocked them by default years ago. Safari blocked them. Privacy advocates had been calling on Google to do the same for the better part of a decade. On April 22, 2025, Google officially announced that Chrome would not be rolling out any new standalone prompt for third-party cookie preferences. Users would need to continue managing those choices themselves, buried inside Chrome settings, the Center for Democracy and Technology, one of the most respected digital rights organizations in the United States, described this decision as a deep disappointment, and the reason is not hard to understand when you remember that Google's entire business depends on the behavioral data that third-party tracking generates. A Chrome that genuinely protected you from cross-site tracking would be a Chrome that undermined Google's core revenue model. This is the browser that 3.5 billion people have set as their default. This is the software that a third of the global population trusts with the most intimate details of their digital life, and the company that built it walked away in April 2025 from a years-long commitment to give users a real choice about being tracked across the web. If you needed a definitive signal about whose interests Chrome is designed to serve, that decision is it, not yours. Advertisers, the same advertisers who pay Google nearly $300 billion a year for the precise behavioral targeting that Chrome's data collection makes possible. There is another layer to this that rarely gets discussed, even among technically sophisticated users, and that is what Chrome did at the extension layer. In 2023, Google began rolling out a transition called Manifest v3 in Chrome's extension framework. This sounds like internal technical plumbing, but it is not. What it actually means is that Chrome fundamentally restricted the capabilities of ad blocking and tracker blocking extensions. The most powerful ad blocker available on any browser platform is Public Origin. Security researchers and privacy engineers have consistently rated it as the gold standard for blocking the kind of tracking infrastructure We have been talking about, under the old framework, public origin could block trackers with what is called dynamic filtering, responding in real time to the full scope of what a page is trying to load. Under Manifest v3, those capabilities are meaningfully constrained. Google fully disabled all Manifest v2 extensions in Chrome. As of July 2025, the full public origin extension was removed from the Chrome Web Store in late 2024, and Chrome users now only have access to a lighter version with significant limitations. The developer of public origin has publicly refused to build a fully compliant Manifest v3 version, stating it would fundamentally compromise the tool's core function. So in Chrome, the browser is making it harder to protect yourself from tracking. That is not an accident. It is a product decision made by a company whose revenue depends on that tracking continuing. And then there is browser fingerprinting, which is increasingly relevant and which most users have no idea is happening to them. A fingerprint in this context has nothing to do with biometrics. It refers to the combination of subtle technical characteristics of your browser and device that can be read by any website you visit. The fonts installed on your system, your screen resolution and color depth, the time zone your device reports, the graphics card your machine uses, the exact versions of your browser and operating system, your language settings, the plugins you have installed. Individually, none of these identify you uniquely, but combined, they create a fingerprint that is statistically unique to your specific device with very high probability. And the critical thing about fingerprinting is that it does not use cookies at all. You can clear your cookies, use private mode, delete your history, and a sophisticated tracker can still identify your device across websites using nothing. But this fingerprint, Chrome's built-in protections against fingerprinting are weak. That is not an oversight. It is logic. Making you harder to identify means making you harder to target with advertising. I also want you to think about something that rarely gets discussed, which is what these profiles actually do in the world. The data flowing through Chrome is not just used to show you ads for shoes you looked at once. The profiles built from your browsing behavior are used to determine what information you see, what prices you are quoted for the same product depending on what your profile suggests about your financial situation. In documented cases, people with profiles suggesting lower income were shown different pricing than people whose profiles indicated financial stability. These profiles are used in political advertising to target specific messages to specific psychological profiles identified through behavioral data. The browsing patterns flowing through Chrome help determine what political messaging reaches you, tailored to what your profile suggests you are susceptible to. This is not hypothetical. This is the documented function of behavioral advertising platforms running on exactly the kind of data Chrome generates every time someone opens it. So let us take stock of where we are. We have a browser commanding 65% of the global market, operated by a company found to have illegally monopolized search, that reversed its commitment to meaningful tracking protection, that systematically weakened the most powerful privacy tools its users relied on, whose core business model depends on surveilling everything you do, and it's at the center of a federal appeals case about whether it should be forced into a sale. That is the thing running in the background of your digital life. Now let us talk about what you can actually do about it, because this is where the story changes. The good news, and this is something I genuinely did not appreciate until I made the switch myself, is that the alternatives are not compromises. They are not lesser products you tolerate for the sake of principle. They are in many measurable ways better browsers, faster, cleaner, more thoughtful, built by organizations whose survival does not depend on knowing everything about you. The first browser I want to walk you through is Firefox, and I want to start here because Firefox is the most misunderstood of the options. A lot of people think of Firefox as the browser their parents used in 2009, the thing they had before Chrome existed, the underdog that lost, and it is true that Firefox has had a rough decade in terms of market share. But writing it off based on that narrative is a mistake, because Firefox in 2025 is not the Firefox of 2009. It is not even the Firefox of 2020. It is a genuinely excellent piece of software built by an organization whose mission is structurally different from every other major browser maker on the planet. Mozilla, the nonprofit that builds Firefox, is not an advertising company. It does not make money by profiling you. Its mission, legally embedded into its organizational structure, is to ensure the internet remains a global public resource, open and accessible to all. Mozilla generates revenue primarily through search partnership deals, receiving a fee when users use Firefox's default search engine. That is a fundamentally different incentive structure. Mozilla does not benefit from knowing more about you. It benefits from building a browser that you find good enough to keep using and to recommend to people you trust. The concrete privacy mechanics of Firefox are where it genuinely earns its place. Firefox ships with total cookie protection enabled by default. Every website you visit gets its own isolated cookie container. A tracker on one site cannot raid the cookies from another site, even if it is technically present on both. Firefox also ships With enhanced tracking protection that automatically blocks known tracking scripts, social media trackers, fingerprinting scripts, and cryptomeaning code across the web, you do not need to configure anything. You open Firefox and those protections are running from the first page you load. Independent testing found that Firefox on its strict privacy setting produces significantly less fingerprint entropy than Chrome on default settings. Chrome leaves you identifiable enough that sophisticated ad networks can recognize your browser across sessions without any cookies at all. Firefox in strict mode approach is meaningful. Fingerprint resistance without requiring you to use a completely different or more restrictive browsing environment. And then there is the extension story. Firefox is keeping Manifest v2 support alongside Manifest v3, specifically so that tools like Origin continue to work at full capability. Mozilla's position, stated directly on their engineering blog, is that giving people choice and control on the internet has always been core to what they do. This is not an abstract philosophical difference. It has a direct, immediate, practical consequence for you. If you move to Firefox for no other reason than this, it would already be a defensible decision. The performance picture for Firefox has also changed substantially. Recent independent benchmarks found that Firefox uses approximately 18% less RAM per active tab than Chrome. Anyone who has had Chrome open with 15 tabs and watched their computer slow to a crawl knows exactly why that matters. For multitaskers, researchers, developers, or anyone who keeps a lot of context open simultaneously, that memory efficiency compounds into a noticeably more responsive machine. Firefox also has a multi-account containers extension that lets you isolate your work, shopping, and social media into completely separate cookie environments within the same browser. It is one of the most powerful privacy tools available on any platform and is exclusive to Firefox. For most users who want a familiar, trustworthy, and genuinely capable alternative to Chrome, Firefox is where I start the conversation. The import process takes about 30 seconds. You go to the menu, find Import Data, select Chrome as the source, and your bookmarks, history, and saved passwords come over immediately from day one. You are browsing in an environment built by an organization whose survival does not depend on knowing everything about you. The second browser I want to walk you through is Brave. Brave takes a meaningfully different approach and is the right answer for a different type of user. Brave launched in 2016 and is built on Chromium, the same open source engine that underpins Chrome. That matters because it means Brave renders every page exactly the way Chrome does. There is no compatibility gap. Every web standard Chrome supports, and Brave has also committed to maintaining Manifest v2 support, meaning Origin at full strength also runs in Brave. The growth numbers around Brave tell you something important about where this market is heading. As of September 2025, Brave officially crossed 100 million monthly active users. Daily active users surpassed 42 million. The browser has been adding an average of 2.5 million net new users per month over the past 2 years. That is not niche adoption. That is a genuine movement. What Brave does differently from Firefox is that it treats privacy as a default engineering constraint rather than an opt-in feature. Brave Shields, the browser's built-in blocking system, is active from the moment you install it without any configuration required. It blocks third-party ads, third-party trackers, fingerprinting attempts, and cross-site cookies automatically on every page you visit. There is a real-time counter in the toolbar showing you exactly what has been blocked on the current page. When I first installed Brave and started visiting news websites, I watched this counter and it was genuinely eye-opening. Popular news sites routinely trigger 30, 40, sometimes 60 blocked trackers per page load. Social media sites run even higher. Every single one blocked before it loads, before any data leaves your device. Brave reports that its browser loads pages 3 to 6 times faster than other browsers on ad-heavy sites and uses 33% less memory with up to 50% less energy consumption. The speed advantage is something you feel immediately and do not stop noticing. Page loads that used to take 3 seconds in Chrome. Particularly on news sites and content aggregators, snap open in under a second in Brave because the browser is not waiting for dozens of third-party tracking scripts to phone home. On mobile, independent benchmarks have found Brave delivers 40% better battery life than Chrome. On a phone where you are browsing on a commute or a flight, 40% battery efficiency is genuinely significant. Brave also has a private browsing mode with Tor integration built in. In a regular browser's incognito mode, your browser simply does not save a local record of what you visited, but your internet service provider can still see your traffic. The websites you visit can still see your IP address, and surveillance infrastructure can still observe the connection. Brave's Tor window routes your traffic through multiple relay nodes around the world, stripping your IP address and making it extremely difficult for anyone to trace the traffic back to you. This is not something any other mainstream browser offers natively. There is one thing about Brave I want to address honestly because you will read about it. Brave has an optional advertising program called Brave Rewards. Users who opt in can choose to see privacy-preserving ads, the targeting for which is done entirely on your device with no data leaving it, and can receive a small payment in cryptocurrency. For doing so, this is entirely optional. You can install Brave, use it for years, and never touch Brave Rewards at all. The core browser privacy features have no relationship to the advertising program. Some users find the crypto component off-putting, and that reaction is understandable, but it should not be the reason you avoid a browser that is otherwise technically excellent. For users who are heavily invested in the Chrome ecosystem, who have a long list of Chrome extensions they rely on, who want the most frictionless possible transition from Chrome to something meaningfully better, Brave is the most natural path. You can install it, import your Chrome profile including bookmarks, history, and passwords. Install your extensions and be fully operational in under 5 minutes. The interface feels familiar because it is built on the same engine, but what happens in the background is categorically different. Google's data collection infrastructure has been stripped out. The surveillance advertising layer has been removed, and in its place is a browser that is actively working for your privacy rather than quietly monetizing it. So here is where we land. You now have a clear picture of what Chrome is, who built it, why they built it the way they did, and what it does with everything you give it. You also have 2 concrete alternatives that are not compromises, that are free, that you can set up in under 30 minutes, and that are in many measurable ways. Better products than the one you are currently using. The decision in front of you is not a complicated one. It does not require technical expertise. It does not cost anything. It just requires knowing what you now know and deciding whether to act on it. The incentive structure underneath your browser is not a small thing. It shapes every privacy decision that gets made about the product, every feature that gets prioritized, every protection that gets weakened or abandoned. Chrome's incentive structure has been made clear through years of product decisions, legal findings, and the events of 2025. Firefox and Brave are built on a different foundation, and that foundation makes a difference you will feel from the first day you make the switch.